Right, we are live, and good morning to everybody who is watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, listening to us in Clubhouse. Thanks for joining us this morning. It is Wednesday, January the 31st, and we have the pleasure of having the one and only Binathi Sheth with us, the writer, who is also working very hard, posting on LinkedIn as well. The other day, Tim and Binati actually communicated on a post of Binati on LinkedIn about death and cultural perspectives about that, and we came up with this idea about talking and seeing culture through death and also the rituals that different nations have about this event in life. So thankfully, Binati agreed to be our guest, and of course, we have Tim with us. Tim also wrote his thesis in university about this. We hope that you enjoy our um, podcast today because the theme sounds a little bit scary, but actually we're going to look at it from the lens of culture. So we encourage you to join us if you have thoughts and if you have questions, or if you say just, I don't want you to talk about this next time because it scares me, and I cannot sleep well, although I'm sure that it's not going to be the case today.
Okay,
Okay.
Maya, I'm sorry
Yes?
to interrupt. Yeah. So I'm in the comment section. Frank and Timothy both said we can't. Yeah, they can hear me because I'm in a clubhouse, but
Yes.
they're having a tough time hearing you.
Well, I believe that the problem with it with Clubhouse, because
Clubhouse.
yes,
Should we
it's
all move to LinkedIn?
I don't know if from
Or
LinkedIn we
YouTube.
or
You,
YouTube, but
That's where
the
I
thing
hear
is,
you guys.
yes, we can hear you very well, actually, Yuka.
Okay, you could. Okay.
Yes, all right. So the decision is yours about moving to LinkedIn or staying in Clubhouse. But I would like to give the word, the floor to Tim and also to Binati because we have only 1 hour today. So let's continue. Tim, would you like to start?
yeah, just
Because,
a little bit background on how this topic theme came about. It came about pretty quickly. It was unplanned. And so Binati posted about, some of Mishima's literary works, but also that dark side of him that led to him taking his own life. And, it's a very touchy topic, but it resonated because in college I took a class and it was by a guy named D.B. Picken, who was my professor, and he arrived in Japan on November 24th, 1970. First time in Japan. And I was taking this class in like 1983. So like 13 years prior. The next day, splashed all over the newspapers, was Mishima's, suicide. And it shocked him. Because he said, "Oh my gosh, there's a different way of looking at death than what I grew up in, the traditions I grew up in." And he said, if I was a poet, I would have written a poem. If I was a musician, I'd have written a song, but I'm a philosopher, so I wrote a book. And he co-authored a book, Japanese and Suicide. And I took his class and he explained this to us. And the class was on Japanese attitudes toward death, but comparisons with the West and the Judeo-Christian view were also those contrasts. And it was just so fascinating that I actually did my thesis on death in Rakugo. Rakugo is Japanese comic storytelling. So I thought I'd look at death through the lens of humor, but also culture and what that tells us about culture. So when I read, Binati's post, one of the things that came back to me, and this was maybe a little controversial, but the to give you a very, very short summary, his conclusion was that suicide is a form of communication. It's the ultimate
Absolutely.
form.
100%.
It's the ultimate apology, and you're forgiven for doing that. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to us from a different culture. And then here's the one that's kind of a little bit like a lot of people talk about, the Buddhist tradition from India, and there's a lot to do with karma, and you're trying to be reborn. He said basically the whole idea of death having moral significance was kind of phased out, where it didn't really have big moral significance versus the Judeo-Christian, you're judged and you go one way or the other, right? And
Yeah.
those exist within Buddhist culture, the concepts of Gokuraku, heaven and hell, but it just they kind of phased out going to hell, and it wasn't really rejected as much as it didn't fit the culture and the idea of rebirth and stuff like that. If you're warring with other clans, you don't want to believe the idea that you could be reborn into another clan, right? This was the Sengoku
It will
Jidai.
dissuade recruitment
Yeah.
100%.
Anyway, that was the logic. So those are, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong because not everybody might agree with that last point, but it's still interesting way to look at
Yeah.
it, right? So that was kind of why I got really fascinated with Binati. I love Binati. You're just so intelligent. I love reading your stuff.
Oh,
Your
thank you.
content is really, really good. And so I'm looking forward to hearing your point of view.
Mm,
Um, because that hopefully will broaden my perspective and maybe shine some light on some of my blind spots. So with
right.
that background, the floor is yours, and I hope people could hear me on
Of
Clubhouse.
course, of course. Yes, thank you for having me to talk about this topic because no, I particularly remember getting fascinated with death from anime of all places because uh, the first time I remember thinking about death was Mufasa. I think everybody that is a certain age knows when Mufasa kind of dies in The Lion King. And as a young kid, I was a kid when I saw that movie for the first time. I was like, the lion has gone in the stars. What does this mean? So, this is the first time I believe I encountered death. I was lucky enough to not actually see death in the family for the longest time. Like, all my grandparents were alive, way into me becoming an adult. There were no like dramatic deaths around that I was allowed to witness. People were obviously leaving, but somehow I was kind of shielded away from it for some reason. And then, of course, I started sailing the high seas. That's a reference, by the way. Yeah, I to watch uh, some TV shows which had a heavy shonen tends to have a heavy focus on death, or at least the possibility of death happening to the lead characters, and you're like, oh my god. And then that's the first time I realized, why am I scared if the animator stops drawing a character, right? That's the first time I remembered contemplating what exactly is this thing. uh, and I started asking questions because obviously you've got to be that annoying kid that continuously bothers people with random questions like, what is this and what is that? So we have this thing called Mrutyunjay mantra. So I just a random little note. My family is Hindu. I tend to identify more on the side of agnosticism than anything else, but the family definitely is Hindu. So a lot of the things that I'll be touching on today from the Indian culture side of things will be more about that because that is part of my lived experience, right? And not like the lived experience of the wide cultural expanse that is India. So there are all of these different stories. The relative that is not able to like pass on, we'll sing like the Gajendra Moksh part at like 3 4 in the night. It's based on a story about an elephant that couldn't die, and then God comes to the elephant and tells the elephant to kind of shed off all its attachments, and like everything left behind would be fine. You just you just need to let go. And at the end of the chant, the elephant lets go and it is allowed to move on to the next life. uh, and then after doing this chant, like, this was done for my maternal grandmother, right? And it worked. And I was so baffled by this because can we control this? That is the question that came to my head. So, in a sense, a lot of random little storytelling mixing with some very very random observations in the absence of any kind of like real world feedback, because the moment you start asking about it, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think talking about death is also taboo in Japan in terms of like mentioning it here and there. I don't know culturally, like I've just read about it. It's taboo over here as well. It's like if you talk about it, it's gonna show up like Bloody Mary. What was it? Looking at a mirror and saying Bloody Mary thrice, and she shows up. That's the approach Indians tend to have when it is time to discuss anything pertaining to death. Uh, is it like that with Japanese society as well?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, and I'm not into this world, but I think she's a manga writer, a woman, sexy something was the title of the manga, and the author, and she passed on, and it was on
Okay.
the news. I believe it was yesterday, last night, and they say that she died, but they don't say why. And often that leads the listener to say, maybe could be at her own hands. That's like how it's presented.
Oh.
It's not said, or it
Mm.
wasn't. It wasn't last night, and that was the comment my wife made. Right,
Yes,
we're having dinner and listen, watching NHK. Right.
mm.
Um,
Well, usually, yes, in Japan, if somebody commits suicide, that is not announced, and it
it's
is
not
usually
announced.
and it is kept secret within the closest members of the family. So,
Oh,
right, yes, it's like a taboo, talking about
same,
somebody.
same.
Yes, here it's.
However,
Mhm,
humor deals with taboo
Okay.
mhm,
in any culture. So there is a rich amount of humor about death.
mhm,
Okay.
And in Rakugo, I mean, 40 stories of the classics were
Mm.
about death, right? But a
Mm.
lot of them are parodies, like
Okay.
Shinju, Kabuki. You got the two lovers, the forlorn lovers. They commit double suicide, right?
Yeah.
So Kabuki was serious drama. Rakugo was poking fun at that. You
mhm.
know, like they try to do it, and one chicken's out at the last minute, and the other one does it, but the other one doesn't die, and now she's going to get revenge. Stuff like that. It's.
Mm.
But again, when you're dealing with comedy, it is taboo by nature. But yes, I think we all agree that's why it's in comedy, because it is indeed a little bit taboo to. You got to
Yes,
be very careful. You got to be very very careful.
Mm.
And
And it's
each
so ironic, right? Both of our cultures have glorification of uh, death, right? So if
romanticized
it's
almost
romanticized,
and
and then when
aesthetic.
someone makes that decision for themselves, it's like we cannot talk about it. It's such a weird dichotomy that on the one
Yeah,
hand,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just it's aestheticism, even in death, like the ritualized suicide of the samurai.
mm,
If anyone ever saw The Last Samurai, and
yeah,
it that one scene in the battlefield where the samurai warrior, he's with Tom Cruise, his buddy, right? And he's committing seppuku in the battlefield, and he looks up and he sees the wind blowing the cherry blossoms off the cherry blossom tree, and he says, perfect, perfect, and then he keels over, right? That was
right.
like the ultimate expression of this romantic death, just like the cherry blossom at the peak of its beauty. The winds blow it away, and that was the samurai. And it's funny, salary men, showa men that I knew a lot of almost fantasized about dying at work while you're doing a good job. Some of them used to talk about that. So, yes, I think there is a romanticized, right?
it is 100%. We have like entire subcultures around. Specifically, if you look at like Rajput clans and all of this, not only the men at war, the soldiers at war, the women that are left behind, right? We have like rituals like, say, Johar, where they'll consume poison and jump into pits of fire together, like a communal activity, just because
Oh
like the
man.
king lost the battle. And it is, there's a movie, you can check it out. It's a movie by Sanjay Leela Bhansali called Padmavat. I'll share a clip with you later on. And they have shown like a fictionalized narrative, and it's seen as this, like, it's a lot of women choosing to walk to their deaths into a fire instead of whatever else happens to women that are left behind, because all the men have died at battle. This is not supposed to be romanticized, but it is, because I think what you said about comedy kind of also applies to the romanticization and the dramatization. The reality is so grim, and if you are being truly honest, the reality is so sad, because in general, I think what a lot of people who leave these notes and these kind of creations behind, I think what a lot of these people were feeling was either like, and I'm speculating, was either like a lot of clarity or like a lot of helplessness, or maybe a mixture of both. And what else are you supposed to do when you have, on one hand, I don't see any other way out of it except taking myself out of it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
fine. Or there's nothing else I could do. Like, we have a thing, Aage Kua Piche Khai, which is, there's a well in the front and like a valley at the back. Either way, you're gonna fall down. So what you gonna do, right? You're gonna laugh and then surrender to fate.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of that stems from. It's sadly stems from people not knowing what to do, right? Because all of this also has one other thing in common: ostracization. There is like
Oh,
social ostracization.
oh yeah. 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 And
Yes,
again, all cultures, but I think some cultures it's more intense because if you value belonging, if belonging is a high level value, then
Mm.
not belonging, being pushed out of the group is torture, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
yes,
So
So
there was
mm,
like this another conversation where we were just casually, like, because discourse is messy, right? It's so messy. You're not going to find nuance when discourse is happening. You can find nuance later on when you filter it down and like try to be an intellectual. We were discussing the key differences between the East and the West, and I am broadly categorizing the world
okay,
into two bits, right?
sure,
So,
sure, sure.
uh, anyone who gets fixated on this because of the geopolitical situations right now, please, please, I know, but for the sake of simplicity, just indulge me. Uh,
Yes,
the West, I think West has always prioritized individualism, right? And because of that,
yes,
uh, there is there is some parts of expression, specifically when we talk about self-expression, that is sort of taken care of. um, Even maybe a little bit in the fact that you might say some random things and people might ignore you, right? Because, oh yeah, that's just Binati being Binati, like, fine. Whereas in the East, we have such a collectivist thing going on,
right,
and we call it culture. uh, and I understand that that culture has stemmed from a tendency to protect each other, where if you are having, like, say, you, just because we have board exam season right now, like 10th and 12th standard exams, which determine the path of your career, like the entire society will show up in your house to have tea and say best of luck for your exams, kid, right? That
yeah,
type of a thing. You can't even do an exam without 200 people coming and wishing
that's
you best of luck.
oh my goodness.
So it's you are dissuaded from expression. You are mainly taught to toe the line, no matter what. You can express yourselves in private if you want, but all in all, you have to toe the line, protect the honor of the family, or do
Exactly.
this. Everyone will be handed a tenet, right? And at some point, I think the individual gets buried in there. And if this individual faces some kind of trauma that they're not able to overcome on their own, even though they have 200 people around them, it's like, how do I voice myself? Because if I admit to having done this, I violate, say, tenet 2, tenet 4, tenet 5, tenet 6, and
Mm.
it will bring shame.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so weird. It's so weird. Like, the one thing that collectivism is supposed to do is protect each other. And I
Yeah.
feel like it is the thing, it is the sword that, like, stabs so many people into these situations.
Mhm.
Swords are, knives can be used as a tool and they can be used to hurt. It's like
Yeah.
anything. But that's really how it is in Japan as well. You do something wrong as an individual, you are bringing shame on your family, and your identity is tied to your family, but your family's identity is also tied to you because you're a fraction of the whole. You're a jibun, one's part.
Mhm. Yes.
So the pressure of knowing that there are consequences for your actions on not just yourself, but other people
Mm.
creates some of that social pressure to toe the line, to use the word, the expression you used. So just that. So again, that the collectivism, and it's again, there's different explanations, but one thing, most rice cultures are collectivist. I think all rice.
Rice cultures.
Yes, yes, all over.
Oh,
Look,
that is
to any rice
brilliant.
culture. But no, and it's very simple. You can't survive as a lone wolf in a rice culture. You need, and some people, some anthropologists have said the oldest business in the history of the planet was some Chinese rice paddy where the family ran a business.
Hmm.
And you have to work year round. I mean, the rice culture, there's no resting, man. And that's why they only have a 1 month off for school in Asia, because it was based on the cycles of, same with America. It was based on the cycles of the harvest versus the planting season. And so you get 3 months off in America. This is my generation, right?
Yeah.
Japan is like 1 month. China's 1 month. Pretty sure Korea's run 1 month. Rice, you got to always keep working
Mm.
at it, right? So
Hmm.
that's part of it. And Maya's mentioned this as well. When you're in an area of disasters, you just to survive, you need to pull together. You need to have that social glue. So there's
Yeah.
all these conditions that contribute to it. But I
Yeah.
agree, and again, the Hawaiians are collectivists. They grow taro very much like rice, water
Mhm.
deep. They use water. It's in, like there's different types, but wet rice farming, right? Um,
Yeah. I think that's
Uh,
fascinating because now from this conversation, and I'll just diverge a little bit, but I just now realize, based on what you said, Tim, about well, the kids and the summer holidays, how long they are depending on different cultures, and also what crops people grow there, right? So it's interesting because only now I realize that back home in Bulgaria, our holidays are 3 months long. But when you start, from June, you basically start with fruits, with harvests there, and you continue with, well, first with cherries, then with summer, what do they call it? Summer apples and other fruits like apricots and everything, and then you finish with the harvest of the wheat and
Hmm.
the sunflowers. And at the end of the day, it's 3 months. Coming to think of it,
Of
and
course.
you just gave me a new perspective, and maybe it's a new thing, who knows, but yeah, who knows really. It's just it's coincides with all the harvests there
well,
we have.
I urge you to read Malcolm Gladwell's what is it? The Outliers.
Hmm.
Yes.
So he talked about this specifically in The
Yeah.
Outliers, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, but he's not the first one. The other anthropologists have
Right.
made
Yeah.
that comparison. But
um, I have a question.
Yes,
sure,
you can.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and before that, and the people in the clubhouse, you guys probably can hear me better than the other three, but you can always move to the YouTube or LinkedIn, and then if you want to come to the stage, you can come to the clubhouse, and then I will bring you up here.
Yes.
Anyway, so having said that, I have a question. Everything you just said, all three of you, I so agree with every said things you said, but I think it's attitude toward death in Japan is changing. It was taboo, especially from the kids' point of view. Actually, I am in the age. Some of our parents are passing. So I have this conversation with my friends, saying that we cannot ask our parents to, hey, please plan for your death, because no matter how much we wish, you're not going to be with us forever. And in Japan, we're facing the aging population. So these days, because I do this for a living, but end of life planning industry is really popping up. So
Wow.
this they sort of force you to plan for your death, because for the parents, they don't want to be a burden for the kids.
Exactly.
Also, this is really sad things happening, but after the parents are gone, kids are fighting for the money left behind.
Yes.
So now they are sort of this industry, because it's easier third party coming in, say, hey, law said divide this way, this that way. So that is, it's sort of, everything is just to put this to the professional, so that everybody has no hard feelings. But is that because unique to Japan, because Japan is aging? So Britannula is India is a much younger country. So maybe this sort of
We
industry.
have similar things, Yuka. We have similar things. What you described, I was like, same pinch. Exactly same thing happening over here. You can't talk to parents about death. Like, I have all my papers sorted and I'm 30. And if I ask my parents to sort their paper, they will beat my ass. Because
Yeah.
they are
That's
like,
hilarious.
yeah, and see, I have registered myself as an organ donor, including, like, when you donate your body for science. I've done that. But like, you have to notify your parents, you have to notify somebody, or whoever is around you, that please ensure that they preserve the things that need to be properly preserved. Otherwise, your body starts decaying.
Yeah.
I still haven't, kind of said it, because I know there's going to be a beat down the day I have this conversation with them. Right? And I don't know what they have set up for them. I cannot ask them. All I know is there's insurance. That's the only thing I know. And
To Yuka's point, so we watch. I don't watch TV, but I watch it during dinner because my 92-year-old mother-in-law likes watching it. Right.
yes, I love
This
her.
is all these commercials are targeted at people her age in their 80s, and a lot of these are singing shows as well, not just the news. Right.
Mm.
And just like Yuka said, they have these beautiful commercials. Oh, you have to plan for your children so you're not a burden on your children. And we have this beautiful package where everything will be taken care of. And then my mother-in-law goes into drama queen mode, and we have to say, "Oh, mom, we love you. You're fine." But so maybe to her, I don't know. I think she's getting used to it. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is, like, when you say, is it taboo in Japan? Right.
Mm.
And we go back to the old precept. Everything you can say about Japan, you can also say the opposite, because it
Mm.
depends on the situation. Right. So there's the
Yummy kawaii
tatema,
fashion.
there's
People
the
literally wear
tatema,
death.
right? Tatema is your truth for public consumption. And then there's
Mm.
hone, between
Mm.
friends. And
Oh.
between friends, I think people are very frank about talking about it, and they were even back then. And
Mm.
in some ways, I almost feel like it's more taboo in the West. Although I come from an Irish tradition where there's a lot of funeral jokes too. So
Exactly.
Anyway, those are just some, some observations. And then, again, the whole burden thing, Yuka made a really good point. So maybe it is changing.
Mm.
Maybe it is becoming more out in the open.
Yeah.
Mm.
But
But
I think that as human beings, we are afraid of thinking about death.
yes, of
And
course.
because we are afraid of thinking about it, and we don't want to think about losing our loved ones, right? So this is
Yeah.
another layer of our fear. And
Yeah.
because of this fear, you prefer not to. I mean, we have created the taboo. And
Mm.
We did.
so, right, because we need to, first of all, it's very difficult to rationalize death, like rationalize the, um, I mean, well, that lack of existence, right?
Yeah.
Because at some point we're here and then the next day we're not. And then what
Mm.
happens? Then it is so scary to think that, I don't know whether you have ever experienced this, but I remember when I was in my teenage years, and then I was in the bathroom at home, and then I didn't realize that the mirror above the sink, just my mother took it off because she wanted to change it, but the mirror was not there. Okay, and then
Mm.
when I tried to wash my hands and I looked up to see my face, and then I saw nothing because there was
Oh,
no mirror. And then I was expecting to see myself, and I didn't see anything, and it was such a scary moment
yeah.
because I was not there. My brain registered
Oh, that's
the lack
interesting.
of, yes, the lack of myself being there. It was so scary, and I
Mm.
thought, oh, this is probably how we feel when, on a very basic level, when we cannot see ourselves here anymore. And that thought is really scary. It is horrifying,
And that's
but
why humor is a defense
yeah,
mechanism against that. That's
Yeah.
how that's one powerful, potent way we deal with the fear. We laugh at what we fear, um,
right.
which was a big part of my thesis.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I believe humor is a way in which this is one of those half-baked ideas, right? But humor, I think, is you cannot laugh at something till you have chosen to completely be an ostrich about it. Like the eagle is not coming, bury the head in the sand. I can't
Hmm.
see it, so it's not there. You can either laugh at something when you have that thing going on where you are denying whatever the problem is, or you have conquered your
Hmm.
fear about that thing, right? You could only laugh at something if it's one of these two things. Again, this is a how bake idea. I don't know, I haven't really explored it much because I tend to use humor as a defense mechanism, specifically when it
Yeah.
comes.
me too.
You
I
can
Yeah.
start laughing at it, it's fine. It's totally kind of disbands the situation. And
yes.
everyone, because you have laughed,
Yes.
everyone is forced to laugh with you, right? Just to be
Yeah.
polite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, Tim, to your point about all those commercials on TV about end of life planning, the industry, and so on, and to Yuka's point too, how important they are. I think that also part of our way of, I mean, we're programmed to accept some universal truth much more easily when I told to us by people we don't know. And we get so hurt, when a family member says that to you. And I wonder what it is. And it's once again about that, Yuka. As you said, we cannot tell our parents, get ready to die, because
Right.
that's right. And
Mm,
because, first of all, we're afraid we don't want to lose them. And, it's whatever, everything else there, on emotional level. But
mm,
when a company that has nothing to do with us, goes on TV and says, okay, get ready to die, and that's fine. And I think that they listen. I can, although my mother-in-law is still, I think she still has quite a lot of years ahead of her. She's obviously watching these commercials, and she's trying to get ready, which is like, give me a break. You're going to be with us for quite a while still, but it's
You get
yes,
hit by a bus tomorrow. I mean,
right,
mm. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
logic. I know. I get
yeah.
it.
See,
So
I think those companies are kind of cunning in a way. They don't, sort of separate like only, let's say, for the death planning alone. They make it like lifetime planning, and the end of life is also just a part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have kids, and they're raising kids. You have to save the money for that, and the college and marriage. You work and you retire,
Yeah.
and oh, by the way, we have the funeral planning
Yeah.
if you're so inclined.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. It's an option.
So I
but
just Googled it, right? Because I remember randomly reading it. See, Yuka
Yeah.
once again hits
Off
it on the
stuff.
head. The death thing is a $20 billion industry at this point in time.
All right.
Yes,
mm,
so yeah, and this is as of 2019. So
Wow.
since then we've had a pandemic, and we
yeah,
had ghouls, literal ghouls. I don't know what Japan had, because I think you guys have Ningen Doku and data and everything, and the country is smaller in size, right? So I suppose there's still dignity afforded there. Over here, people just drop to all charades, and the cunningness and like the greed that maybe lives in a person and an industry, specifically the healthcare industry, it just came out during the pandemic. Like
Wow.
they weren't even wearing
Yeah.
masks. They were wearing masks, but they were not wearing like the social
Yeah.
masks we put on. Every person, every body that was rolling in, they were like money, 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 money. And
Mm.
this is it, right? This is so predatory, because
Yeah.
you want people to think about these things ideally without that additional layer of guilt, and they all use every single advertisement that I've seen around these things. And I know this is not about death and society as a whole, this is about how advertising as an industry has evolved. Everybody targets an insecurity, and the fact that you will be a burden on your children is being
Yes.
used as the hook. I
They're
can't even, that is
guilt
so
tripping
shitty
you.
on so many levels.
It's a guilt trip. It's a guilt
Exactly.
trip. Yeah, yeah, I
Mm.
know, I agree. And that's why it resonated when Yuka brought it up. Like the burden, as soon as I heard that, I'm like, exactly. That they're driving the point home. You don't want to be a burden on your children.
Mm-hmm.
Meiwaku, kakenai yomi.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be a burden to you here, but can I change the subject?
Yes.
uh,
Go ahead. Good. Yeah.
I'm like I want to see in India. Hey, Tanya, so it's because of the the old literature sort of reflect the concept of death at that time. Because I was just hey, by the way, this is a great anime for you. The Heike story, the tale of Heike. It's Heike only lasted briefly, and it's a very interesting story. And always, hey, I'm sorry, Tim, women, like guys are sort of died at the battlefield, and the women, rather than being kidnapped, they are choosing to sort of jump into the
Yes.
ocean with their babies in their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a very famous scene, and it's written many times. But I think it's those like about this attitude toward death is changing, right? I think we want to hang on to this life more
Mm-hmm.
compared
Oh
to the
yeah.
past. What do you think of that? Is that like a literature in India is changing, showing like a change in attitude?
So
I
Yuka, could you just clarify what you just said? Just one more time. I just want to make sure I understand what you said. Your last comment.
Okay, okay. So I think it's the death was more beautified.
Mm-hmm.
I
In the
like a
past, yes.
rather than being captured and kidnapped, women are choosing to kill themselves
I got
with
that.
including their babies.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay,
That's in the
gotcha.
back in the old days, right? The samurai era. But now, well, I
Mm.
know some people, you know, there's still some people choose to kill themselves. But don't we sort of hang on to this life more than before?
Mm.
Or I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying it right, but
No, no, no. I think you kind of summarized, right? Like, I think that is why what was romanticized and glorified once upon a time, right? I would maybe safely say till 1970s or something like that, is now heavily demonized in ways,
Oh, yeah,
to
interesting.
the point where it brings shame to the family, right? Like fighting a battle with an unseen enemy, let's say like any kind of neurodivergency that makes it difficult for a person to, put up that fight. I am not condoning that choice, but I think calling it a battle is not a wrong description. How is that battle different from the battle that one fights? I mean, of course, from a physical standpoint, yes, but the battle that we see on the battlefield is also about wits. It is also about the strongest, most courageous soldier that is the first to draw sword is the one that falls on it first, right? Because this soldier was naive enough to be the first in line.
Yeah,
So uh, it's we have these we had, and I love this, we also beautified death in this country, whether it was in the name of sacrifice for the honor of the nation or the clan, or the community, whether it was choosing to follow the ones who had died. Like we had not just Johar, we also had Sati, where women would sit on the funeral pyres of their husbands. uh, and it was there for the longest time. It took the British Empire abolishing it for it to go away, right? This is how death was romanticized and glamorized, and now there's like a 180. We had a suicide happen in my neighborhood. uh, a salary man worked in my father's company. His daughter came running to our house and she was like, you know and nobody in the entire like society talked about it. Everybody was there for the rituals. Everybody just stood silently as that family moved away. uh, Nobody said anything. It was, I was younger, right? So I didn't really know what was going on. And in retrospect, I understand now what was going on. But at that point in time, I didn't really realize what happened, why they went away the way they went away in shame, in what was possibly the darkest moments of that family's life. Two daughters, the lady, the man's parents, they just disappeared from our lives, and none of us said anything. So that is so
yeah,
disappointing. That is like us failing at the one thing that we're supposed to do for each other, right? That is
yeah,
just
yeah,
be
yeah,
kind, be kind. And it's like, no, we can't be kind to you because you had one job. Your one job was, as Yuka said, you have to survive for as long as you can drag this out to be. If you can't do it, well, shame on you and everyone associated to you. That is just such a 180 from how both of our cultures. I will like I'll stick to commenting on Indian culture because I haven't lived in Japan, so don't really know how things are on ground. But it's a 180 from what was seen as glorious, choosing to like give up on life, is it's now the most shameful thing you could do. We
yeah,
had like, this was actually just 2 3 days ago, like a young, not even 18-year-old girl committed suicide because she was afraid of giving an exam. It's called JE Advanced. You give it for getting into engineering colleges, and she couldn't talk to her parents that like this is too much for me, and she hung herself.
yeah,
And it's we are seeing a lot of coverage around students choosing to do this because we have exam pressures and entire like industries around forcing children to become IIT, IIM graduates and things of the sort. It's and the fact that you can't tell your parents that I couldn't give one exam, it's so bad, and you so alone that the ceiling fan or stepping in front of a train or consuming poison, that's the only way out. I cannot believe this is where we are as a society. specifically seeing the cultural literature we have around,
Yeah.
how we used to see it, right? How we used to at least support each other through this. Because
Not, I'm sorry, pardon for my ignorance, but does your religion believe in afterlife?
we have a version, like we have the rebirth thing. So it's a cycle of rebirths. You, based
So,
on the,
okay, rebirth. Okay.
Right.
yeah, based on the dharma and the karma. Dharma is responsibility, karma is action. You get
Yeah.
to be reborn, and you have to follow this treacherous cycle of dharma and karma and rebirth till the point where, you have,
No
let's
desires.
say, collected enough Pokemon balls.
And Pokemon Ball.
Yeah,
That's a good
gotta catch them
point.
all.
Yeah,
And then you finally
I,
get to be one with the
I
Almighty.
love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I've heard that the society, like the rich sort of believe in rebirth, or the afterlife, the the higher rate of suicide. I'm not sure if that's right, because I've heard it. Because hey, I cannot stand this current life. Why
Mm.
don't I my next life? What I try to, I don't know. This may be simplified version. So, but I know, I think in Japan there's still high, teenage suicide, and like you said, the kids are under a lot of pressure, and then I don't know. I'd like to do something about that. But anyway, I'm sorry. I always get off the topic, but
Mm.
yeah.
No, I
So
wanted to
tangents
just,
are always wonderful.
yeah, thank you. I mean, and I think, and I just thought of this just chatting with you guys. I think when it comes to suicide now, okay, you said the ugly, it's kind of the beautification is gone, but on a good point, I think the conversation recently immediately shifts to mental health. Okay. And the irony is that mental health has also been a taboo. So we're
Hmm.
Mm.
addressing a taboo with
Right.
another taboo, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, mental health is, and then you can trace that back to society. If you live in a pressure cooker society where your family and your friends and society in general is pressuring you to do something that you don't want to do or that isn't you, yeah, I mean, there's so many causes,
Hmm.
but in the end, the person says they decide it's more painful to exist than to not exist, or it's more
Right.
horrible to exist than not to exist. And
Or
to
in the case of the likes of Mishima, I would, be born again, like Yoaki
or
Matsui.
be born again. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Well, that's really, yes. I'm happy that we went into this direction because we have a question on YouTube from Hiroaki, and he says, "I'm curious about I'm curious about hearing about death and resurrection dynamics."
Hmm.
So once again, we touched upon this a little bit earlier, like the belief of the next life, and as Binati, as you said, there are cycles there and so on. But I just wonder how it is in Japan, because sometimes I sense that there is a belief here as well that every every being and everything has a life, right? And then when you die, you actually have a life in the afterworld. But
Hmm.
I'm not sure there is that this belief of resurrection here in Japan.
Hmm.
So how is this, Tim, if you
Yeah.
have studied about that
Oh man,
too?
I
Just
it depends on how you want to interpret the stories in anything, whether it's the Bible or everything else, right? My interpretation of the death and resurrection, and this is mine. I'm not saying it's correct. Okay, hold on. I got to step out real quick. Okay,
okay.
sorry about
All right. Okay.
So
I don't
I'll
know.
I'll fill in the void in that time then.
Mm-hmm.
I think resurrection is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Specifically with Hindu mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know whether you've seen The Good Place. Have you seen The Good Place? It's a TV show on NBC.
No, I haven't.
Right.
No.
So let's just, because it's the ending of that show. Oh, it's one of the most sublimely Shinto things I've seen. And they
Okay.
are not even, I think, doing it as a religious thing. I think that they're essentially trying to equate it down to energy, right? Like if we just look at, and I'll come back to speaking of how we look at the resurrection dynamic over here in India, under the umbrella of Hinduism, because we have a lot of religions here, and it changes, right? It changes depending on which religion we are talking about. So at the end of the day, we are all energy, right? The energy enters and then the energy leaves. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really leave, it just goes back into the system and it comes back. So in spirit of that, resurrection is just seen as the spirit kind of jumping mediums, so to speak. It
Yeah.
just
Oh,
finds a new medium. I am Binati, a woman in this life, maybe because I did something that ordains me to be a horse in my next life. So there you go. In my next life, I'm
yeah.
a horse. Then, if in that life I am ordained to be a dung beetle, I'll be a dung beetle. The point is, the soul is going to be the same. The packaging is going to keep changing depending on actions.
Yeah.
This is how we handle resurrection. And I think what Tim said initially about, I believe you said morals, right? Let me look. You mentioned that there's moral significance in death. We have
Mm-hmm.
that too, right? They use this threat that
Yeah.
if you don't live well, you will not die well. And if you
Exactly
don't
right.
die well, you'll be born as a dung beetle,
Yeah.
pushing poo all your life. So
Well,
it's
Japan, you're a Hotoke-san automatically. You're a Buddha. I mean, they just automatically, just because you died, it sucks dying, so we're gonna make you Buddha. You get a promotion, you know.
Yes, and Tim,
oh,
yes, I think it's
promoted.
also, yes, it's also interesting how I'll move a little bit closer to our age, let's say, our era. So
Mm,
I cannot help it but think about how souls here, as you say, once you die, you're a Buddha. You're forgiven for everything that happened, right?
mm,
And
Yeah.
then you could have been the worst possible human being, the cruelest of everybody here,
yeah.
and you're forgiven. And then people go to your grave or your tomb, and they pray, but they don't pray to glorify what you did in your life, right? I think
Mm,
that is very often misunderstood by foreign.
Right.
um,
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
and yes, and of course here we come, to the issue of the the Second World War criminals and
Yasukuni Shrine. Yeah.
Yasukuni Shrine and so on. And very few people very few people understand that when people go to pray there, they do not pray for what was. They pray for what is, and for the peace of those souls that they have eventually found peace. So
mm,
I think
Yeah.
this is
No,
a
I
very
agree. That's a
yeah,
really good point. And
important
if
point.
you're
Yes.
looking at it through a different lens,
Hmm.
then you're not going to understand it, you know. And I'm not saying, I'm not judging. I'm not saying
No,
it's good or
no,
bad,
it's not about
but
judgment. Yeah.
I did want to like finish my point. So the resurrection, this is how I interpret it. Doesn't mean it's right. I'm just saying my interpretation because I don't
mhm,
take stories literally, right? So
mhm,
I saw it as Jesus died, people mourned
mm,
for 3 days,
mm,
and then they realized that they couldn't kill the ideas and the teachings and that those continued to live on. And in their mind, it was resurrected. And their mission now was to spread the word. That's how I look at it. Now, a lot of people take that literally as a miracle, and that's fine. That's up to them. I wouldn't argue, that point. So that's how I look at it. But again, and I wish I could quote Joseph Campbell exactly, but basically he said half the people in the world say they are believers because they literally believe the metaphors in their religions. And half the people say they're atheists because they don't believe that those metaphors are true, have any truth in them. I'm paraphrasing, but so that's kind of how I view that. Those are the lens I view, the religion I was raised in, for example.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think still once again it speaks, to how differently we view the world and how differently we see things. Because in the Western world, I think that the dichotomy is much stronger. It is even white or black. It is even good or bad. And
Yeah.
then the Asian religions, there are so many more nuances and so many shades of colors.
You don't
And
even have to believe in God. It doesn't
right,
matter if you believe
yes,
in God or not. You can still be
yeah,
a member.
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
I
indeed.
think that has to do with like the history, right? From largely speaking, not to like diminish, but the kind of violence that has happened on Asian shores,
Mm-hmm,
I think there's no other way around it, right? Like, uh, what else are you going to do? There's famine everywhere. There's like some random horde of people that have come to like invade you, or your clans within your own village have started fighting each other. And
mm-hmm,
you're just a lowly peasant. You're like, what am I going to do? Let me just, sit and think of some, how we say, la, 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 la. So, out of such kind of thoughts, they were like, might as well give myself something because life is not giving me anything. So,
Right.
maybe
yeah,
might as well rely on what
yeah,
none of us know anything about because nobody has like objectively gone and come back. We are all relying on first person.
Right.
We are
Right.
all
Right.
relying on second person accounts, not first
Yeah.
person
right.
accounts.
Not in the same form, not in the same,
Yeah.
let's say,
So
visual
I'll
shape.
do a tangent here, right? Because I really like how Stoics dealt with death. To be
I
honest,
do too. I do too.
Yes, yeah,
memento mori and memento vivere, both of them.
right.
It's like
Yeah.
brilliant. Assume that you're gonna drop dead today. Every
Mm-hmm.
single morning, just meditate onto that, and suddenly all the things that you're fixating on, right? You're like, why do I care about that?
I
I'm
looked at it.
dropping dead tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
And
agree with you.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So when I read about, I think Seneca's work for the first time, I was like, that is when I realized that I'm seeking for validation and it is
yeah,
causing all of my trauma. And trauma is like the wrong word. All of the dramatic lama stuff that I'm doing, making
right.
myself
Uh,
miserable. For validation, that's never going to come, right? At some point, you have to have radical acceptance around these things. And all the dark thoughts are like, okay, bye. They go away. Because it's often, I think, oftentimes uh, darkness isn't dark with this such a shitty edgelord thing to say, but darkness isn't darkness, right? It's absence of light, and
yeah,
clarity often is light.
mm-hmm.
And
Indeed,
once like a little clarity light comes, you're like, oh, I can see again.
indeed.
So
Yes. Wow.
yeah, this was. I had so much fun doing this talk. I'm. I don't want anyone to answer this question. Answer this question to yourself, okay? But
Mm,
so you talk about there's believers. People
mm,
say I'm a believer, and there's
mm,
people say I'm an atheist, and
mm,
then there's people that say I'm agnostic, right?
mm,
Mm-hmm.
And I always, I always kind of looked at myself in the middle somewhere, like I don't know. And
mm,
and a professor used to say, you can't prove one or the other. You could say, I have reason to believe XYZ. I have
mm,
reason to believe. That's all you could
mm,
say, right?
mm.
And it used to bother me because I hate being an agnostic too. It's just, and so I've come to the conclusion that my response to that whole argument is, can we all agree on a definition of God? Once you figure that out, then we can talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
What
Yeah.
does
The
that
key
mean
takeaway.
to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
versus what it means to me, because that's
Yeah,
the most important thing that
true.
everybody skips over. What's the
Yes,
definition?
yeah, but then Tim, I think that for some, that is really another taboo subject because
Exactly. And that's why I don't want to talk about it. I'm just saying,
right,
everybody, you
yes.
talk to yourself about
That
it.
is inviting trolls in the comment section. When you talk about it, you are like telling trolls, come increase our engagement.
Yes,
Oh no,
indeed,
I
indeed.
don't have time for online drama.
Yeah.
Yes. That is
Okay.
why you have very random gifs. You just, if anyone starts doing drama, you send them the most random gif in the world, and they're like, what does she mean by that? You haven't even put one thought into
You
it. But
stumbled.
you have occupied brain waves in the troll's head, and it's like,
Yes.
yes, victory.
Yes.
Duly noted.
Yeah, I have a story about those random, GIFs or emoticons used, by me in the beginning when I came to Japan. But I'll keep it for another session because it's.
Yes, I think Kawamojis could be another discussion you could
Let's
have with
let's
like
do
a
that,
graphic
Binati.
artist.
Yes, let's do that. That talk about emoticons and emojis and
Yeah.
also GIFs and so on. I think it's going to be fun and
Yes,
fascinating as well.
yes.
Okay, so I want to just wrap up because it's past 9 o'clock already, and it's Wednesday. It's midweek. People have to go to work or commute. So, Binati, thank you so very much for being with us, for agreeing to be with us this morning.
Of
I know
course.
that you had to wake up very early, around what 3:30
I
here.
woke up half an hour before this because I wake up at 4 every day. It's fine. It's part of my thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you
but
so much.
thank you. Yes,
We
thank you.
appreciate
We appreciate it. And
Of
I'm
course.
so very much looking forward to continuing this
The
conversation and
Studio
probably,
Ghibli one. We are
yeah,
supposed to do the Studio Ghibli one as soon as I write the article. That was supposed to be done
right,
in July.
yeah. And so, Tim, thank you very much for bringing Binati to,
Oh,
this.
thank
Yes.
you, man. I'm so happy. I am so
Yeah,
happy. I
Okay.
had
me
so much
too.
fun today. I hope
All right.
everybody enjoyed it.
Yes, I hope so too. And then
Yes.
we'll be here once again on Sunday morning at 8:20, talking about Japanese politics, and then next week again at 8 o'clock Wednesday. So please be with us. And if you haven't connected with Binati or Tim or me yet on LinkedIn, please do that.
Yes.
And then if you want to continue the conversation, we will do that. Of course, if you have other ideas, let us know. Or if you want to be in the conversation, let us know too. And
Yes.
we'll be happy to bring you in. All right. So thanks a lot, really. And we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.